My niece took my daughter's new tablet and said, "Auntie says I can have whatever I want." My sister nodded. "She's right. Your kid has too much anyway." I smiled, took the tablet back, and whispered to my daughter, "Pack your things." That night, I sold the lake house they'd been using for free family weekends. When the new owners changed the locks, my phone exploded with texts I chose not to read. But let me back up, because you need to understand how we got here. How a family that looked perfect from the outside, the kind you'd see in those glossy California lifestyle magazines, could rot from the inside out, like fruit left too long in the Malibu sun. My name is Maria Castellano, and for 38 years, I believed blood was thicker than water, that family meant something sacred, that the people who shared your DNA would never systematically dismantle your life piece by piece while smiling on Sunday brunch. I was wrong about all of it. The tablet incident happened on a Tuesday in March, one of those aggressively beautiful Southern California days where the sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at. My sister Vanessa had shown up at my Palos Verdes estate unannounced, which wasn't unusual. She'd been doing that for years, ever since our parents died and left me the bulk of their fortune. She claimed it was because she missed me, because family should stay close, because her daughter Sienna and my daughter Isabella were practically sisters. What she really meant was that my pool was nicer than hers, my chef made better lunches, and my wine cellar had vintages she couldn't afford on her marketing executive salary. I'd bought Isabella the tablet that morning, a reward for making honor roll at her prestigious prep school in Rolling Hills. She was 12, whip-smart, and beginning to notice things, like how her cousin always wanted what she had, how Aunt Vanessa's compliments came wrapped in tiny barbs, how I'd grown quieter over the past year. I hadn't meant for her to see the cracks forming, but kids are perceptive in ways that terrify us. Vanessa swept through my front door like she owned the place, her highlights perfectly balayaged, her athleisure probably costing more than most people's rent. Sienna trailed behind her, 14 and already fluent in her mother's language of entitlement. They found Isabella in the media room, unwrapping her new tablet, and that's when it started. "Oh, that's gorgeous," Vanessa said, but her voice had that edge I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she was calculating something. "Sienna's been wanting one exactly like that, haven't you, honey?" Before I could respond, Sienna plucked it from Isabella's hands. My daughter's face crumpled, but she'd been raised with manners, taught not to make scenes. That's what wealthy families do. We teach our children to swallow their feelings, to smile through indignities, to value appearances over truth. "Auntie says I can have whatever I want," Sienna announced, and the casualness of it, the assumption, made something inside me go very still. I looked at Vanessa, waiting for her to correct her daughter, to teach her about boundaries and respect and basic human decency. Instead, my sister shrugged. "She's right. Your kid has too much anyway. I mean, look at this place, Maria. You've got everything. Would it kill you to share a little?" And there it was, the resentment that had been festering for years, finally breaking through the surface. In that moment, watching my sister dismiss my daughter's disappointment, watching her teach her own child that wanting something meant deserving it, I saw our entire relationship with sudden, brutal clarity.
This wasn't about a tablet. This had never been about the small things. It was about power, about control, about Vanessa's barely concealed rage that our parents had loved me more, trusted me more, left me more. I smiled then, the same smile I'd perfected over years of charity galas and business negotiations, the one that gave away nothing. I took the tablet back from Sienna, whose mouth dropped open in shock. Apparently, no one had ever told her no before. "Isabella," I said quietly, "go pack a bag. We're going away for a few days." My daughter didn't question me. She just nodded and left, clutching the tablet. Vanessa laughed, this brittle sound that echoed in my vaulted ceilings. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. I was joking, sort of." "Were you?" I kept my voice pleasant, conversational, because it sounded pretty serious, like you actually believe my daughter has too much and yours deserves it more. "Well, I mean," Vanessa gestured around at my custom Italian furniture, my ocean views, my life. "You do have more. You've always had more. Mom and Dad made sure of that. They left you $2 million, Vanessa. They left you their condo in Santa Monica. They paid for your MBA. And they left you everything else. The business, this house, the lake house, all of it. You think that felt fair? You think I enjoyed watching you become the golden child while I got the scraps?" There it was, finally out in the open, the poison we'd been politely ignoring for a decade. I could have argued, could have pointed out that I'd worked in our father's commercial real estate firm since college while she'd pursued her own career, could have mentioned that I'd spent countless nights at our mother's bedside during her final illness while Vanessa was too busy with client meetings, but I didn't. Because I realized, standing there in my beautiful home, that some people will always see themselves as victims, will always find reasons why they deserve what you have. "The lake house," I said instead. "You and Kevin have been using it every other weekend for the past 5 years, free of charge. It was just sitting there empty. You never use it. What's the big deal?" "No big deal at all. Just making an observation." She relaxed slightly, misreading my calm as capitulation. This was her fatal flaw, always had been. She mistook my patience for weakness, my generosity for gullibility. "Look, I'm sorry if I came on too strong. Sienna's going through a phase. You know how teenagers are." "I do," I agreed. "That's why Isabella and I are going to spend some quality time together, away from bad influences." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She was smart enough to know I wasn't talking about boys or social media. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Drive safe, Vanessa. I'll call you later." I practically pushed them out the door, their confusion evident but not strong enough to override their inherent self-absorption. The moment their car pulled out of my driveway, I called my lawyer. "Richard, it's Maria Castellano. I need you to prepare paperwork to sell the Arrowhead property. Yes, the lake house, as quickly as legally possible. And Richard, make sure there's a clause requiring vacant possession within 30 days, non-negotiable." While Isabella packed upstairs, I opened my laptop and started making lists. The lake house was just the beginning. See, what Vanessa didn't know, what nobody knew, was that for the past 18 months, I'd been quietly documenting everything, not because I'd planned for this specific moment, but because somewhere deep down, I'd known it was coming. I'd known that eventually the simmering resentment would boil over, that the careful family balance we'd maintained would collapse. I had emails, texts, photos, recordings.
Evidence of every borrowed item never returned, every boundary crossed, every small cruelty inflicted on my daughter in the name of just playing around. I had documentation of how Vanessa had been telling people at her country club that she practically ran my properties, that I'd be lost without her advice, that the lake house was partially hers anyway. I had proof that she'd been using my vacation property not just for family weekends, but for her own social climbing, hosting parties for her work colleagues, impressing clients, even renting it out on Airbnb for extra cash she pocketed herself. But more than that, I had something else. Something I'd discovered completely by accident 6 months ago, something so explosive that when I first learned it, I'd actually laughed, this slightly hysterical sound that had scared my housekeeper. Because the universe has a sense of humor sometimes, and it had handed me the perfect weapon.
I just hadn't known when or if I'd ever use it. Now I knew. That night, Isabella and I drove to our place in Montecito, a smaller property I kept private, somewhere Vanessa had never been invited. Over dinner on the terrace, my daughter asked the question I'd been expecting. "Mom, why did Aunt Vanessa act like that?" I chose my words carefully. Some people believe that wanting something badly enough means they deserve it. They don't understand that life doesn't work that way. But we're family. Families are supposed to be nice to each other. Real family is nice to each other, sweetheart. Real family respects boundaries and shows up when it matters. Sometimes the people who share your blood are just people you happen to be related to. She processed this, her young face serious in the candlelight. "Are you going to forgive her?" "I don't know yet. But I'm going to make sure she understands that actions have consequences, that you can't just take and expect nothing to change." Isabella nodded, satisfied with this answer in the way only children can be, their moral compasses still uncorrupted by adult complexities. We spent the next 3 days at the beach, surfing lessons and seafood dinners, deliberately disconnected from the chaos I knew was erupting back in LA. I ignored the 17 calls from Vanessa, the dozens of texts, the increasingly frantic voicemails. I ignored Kevin's attempts to reach me, his messages ranging from confused to angry to almost threatening. I ignored my Aunt Carmen's peacemaking efforts, my cousin's just checking in texts, the whole family network activating to pressure me into compliance. On the 4th day, I got a call from my realtor. "Maria, I have 3 cash offers on the Arrowhead property, all above asking. One buyer is particularly motivated. They're willing to close in 2 weeks." "Take it," I said, "the motivated buyer. Tell them I'll knock $50,000 off the price if they can close in 10 days. That's leaving money on the table. I'm not interested in maximizing profit. I'm interested in speed." He paused, too professional to question his wealthiest client's decisions. "Understood. I'll draw up the papers." When the deal closed 9 days later, I didn't tell anyone. I just waited. The new owners, a tech entrepreneur and his wife, lovely people really, took possession on Friday. They drove up from San Diego that afternoon, excited to start their first weekend in their new vacation home. They arrived to find Vanessa and Kevin already there, along with Sienna and 4 of their friends, a party in full swing. My sister had apparently decided to throw a spring break bash at what she still thought was my property. The new owners called the police. I know this because the police called me, since I was listed as the previous owner, and they wanted to verify that yes, I had sold the property, and no, these people did not have my permission to be there. "I sold it over a week ago," I told the officer. "I notified the occupants via registered mail that they needed to remove all personal belongings and return the keys. That deadline was yesterday." This was partially true. I had sent a letter, registered mail, to Vanessa's home address. What I didn't mention was that I'd timed it to arrive while I knew they'd already be at the lake for the weekend, ensuring they wouldn't see it until they got back. A small detail, but an important one. The fallout was spectacular. Vanessa called me at midnight, shrieking so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You insane witch! The cops showed up. They threatened to arrest us for trespassing. Our friends were humiliated. How could you do this to us?" "I sent you notification," I said calmly. "You failed to vacate in the required time frame. That's not my problem." "You sold our lake house." "No, Vanessa, I sold my lake house, the one I inherited from our parents, the one you've been using for free while apparently also making money off it through Airbnb rentals. Did you think I wouldn't find out about that?" Silence. Then, "That was just a few times to cover gas money." 23 times in the past year alone. I have the receipts. Literally. You made over $40,000 renting out my property without permission. That's called fraud, by the way. More silence. I could hear Kevin in the background, cursing, probably already Googling whether they could be prosecuted. "You've lost your mind," Vanessa finally said. "Over a stupid tablet? You're destroying our family over a tablet." "No," I said. "I'm protecting my daughter from learning that being a doormat is a virtue. I'm teaching her that boundaries matter, and I'm done pretending that sharing DNA with someone means they get to treat me like an ATM with no consequences. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you." This made me laugh, genuinely laugh. Really? Mom and Dad, who built their business from nothing and taught me that respect is earned, not given? Mom and Dad, who watched you try to contest their will because you thought you deserved more? They'd be ashamed of me for finally standing up to you? That's your angle? "This isn't over," she hissed. "Kevin's talking to lawyers. You can't just—" "I can, actually. I did. And if Kevin wants to waste money on lawyers to discover that I was completely within my legal rights to sell my own property, that's his choice. But Vanessa, next time you might want to read your mail before using property that's no longer yours." I hung up. Isabella looked at me from across the Montecito living room, concern in her eyes. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's going to be fine," I told her.
Sometimes doing the right thing feels scary at first, but you'll see, it gets easier. What I didn't tell her was that this was only the opening move. The lake house was symbolic, yes, a statement, a warning shot. But it wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was still coming, and it was going to be nuclear. Because here's what Vanessa still didn't know. 6 months ago, I'd discovered that Kevin, her supposedly perfect husband, was having an affair. Not just any affair, an affair with my business partner's wife, a woman named Claire Sutherland, who moved in the same social circles we did. I'd stumbled onto it completely by accident when I'd gone to a restaurant in Newport Beach for a business dinner and saw them together, their body language unmistakable. I'd watched them kiss in the parking lot, watched Kevin slide his hand under her dress, watched them drive off to what I later confirmed was a beachside hotel. I'd hired a private investigator to document everything, not because I'd known what I'd do with the information, but because knowledge is power, and I'd learned long ago that powerful people don't make moves until they have all the facts. The investigator had been thorough. I had photos, hotel receipts, texts Kevin had been stupid enough to send from his personal phone rather than a burner. I had evidence of at least 20 different encounters over the past year. I also had something else, something the investigator had uncovered while following Claire. She wasn't just having an affair with Kevin. She was embezzling from her own husband's business, my business partner's firm, and Kevin had been helping her hide the money in offshore accounts. We were talking about nearly $3 million moved over the course of 18 months. Small amounts at a time so it wouldn't trigger immediate red flags, but adding up to serious federal crimes. My business partner, Andrew Sutherland, was a decent man. He didn't deserve what his wife was doing to him, and he definitely didn't deserve to have his business destroyed by her theft. I'd been trying to figure out the best way to tell him, how to deliver devastating news to someone I considered a friend. But now, watching my sister spiral because I'd taken away her free vacation house, watching her scramble to position herself as the victim, I saw the path forward clearly. I wouldn't tell Andrew about the affair and the embezzlement, not yet. First, I was going to tell Vanessa. I was going to hand her the file with all the evidence and watch her face as she realized her perfect life, her perfect marriage, her perfect image was built on a foundation of lies and crimes. I was going to give her a choice. She could divorce Kevin quietly, cooperate with returning the stolen money, and face the consequences with some dignity intact, or she could deny it, defend him, and watch everything collapse publicly when I turned the evidence over to the FBI and the State Bar Association. Kevin was a lawyer, after all, a partner at a prestigious firm in Century City. When word got out that he'd been complicit in embezzling millions, that career would be over. The house in Manhattan Beach that they were leveraging themselves to the hilt to afford? Gone. Sienna's private school tuition? Not happening. The country club membership? The luxury cars? The whole carefully curated lifestyle? All of it would evaporate. And Vanessa, who'd spent years resenting my success, who taught her daughter that wanting meant deserving, who just this week told me my child had too much, would finally understand what it felt like to have everything taken away. But I was getting ahead of myself. First, I needed to let her stew in the lake house situation, let her rally the family, try to paint me as the villain, work herself into a righteous fury. Let her believe that the worst had already happened. Because the thing about revenge, real revenge, isn't that it has to be fast, it's that it has to be proportional, overwhelming, complete. The following Monday, I drove Isabella back to school and returned to my Palos Verdes house. My assistant had stacked mail on my desk, messages that needed returning, the normal rhythm of life for someone managing multiple properties and investments. But there was also something else, a handwritten letter from my Aunt Carmen, my mother's sister, the family peacemaker who'd been texting me nonstop. I opened it, expecting the usual guilt trip about family unity and forgiveness. Instead, I found something different. Aunt Carmen had written 8 pages, front and back, detailing every instance over the past decade where she'd watched Vanessa manipulate situations, lie to family members, and systematically undermine me. She wrote about conversations where Vanessa had badmouthed me to relatives, times she'd tried to turn our cousins against me, moments where her jealousy had been so obvious that Aunt Carmen had felt compelled to intervene. "I've stayed silent too long," Carmen wrote. "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was really just enabling her behavior. What she did with that tablet, what she said to Isabella, that was the final straw. Your mother would want you to protect your daughter, even if it means setting boundaries with her sister. I support whatever you decide to do, and I want you to know that not everyone in this family is blind to what's been happening." I called her immediately. "Aunt Carmen, I got your letter." "Good. I meant every word." Her voice was firm, none of the usual wavering uncertainty. "I've been talking to your uncle Roberto, to your cousins Daniela and Sophia. We've all seen it, Maria. The way Vanessa treats you like a bank she can raid whenever she feels like it. The way she talks about you behind your back but smiles to your face. We've been complicit by staying silent, and I'm done with that. I appreciate you telling me this. There's more you should know. Last Christmas, at my house, when you left early because Isabella was sick, Vanessa spent an hour telling everyone that you were spoiling your daughter, that you were raising her to be entitled, that someone needed to bring you down a peg. She was laughing about it, Maria, laughing about wanting to see you fail." Something cold settled in my chest. Did anyone defend me? I did, so did Roberto and the girls, but some of the family just sat there, uncomfortable but not willing to speak up. That's when I realized we've created this dynamic where Vanessa gets to be cruel because no one calls her out on it. We've let her weaponize family loyalty against you. What changed? Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw your daughter's face when Vanessa said she had too much. I saw a 12-year-old girl learn that her family doesn't value her, that her feelings don't matter, that wanting something means you can just take it from someone else. And I thought about your mother, about how hard she worked to build something for her daughters, and how disappointed she'd be to see what Vanessa's become. We talked for another hour. Carmen told me about the Airbnb rentals. Apparently, Vanessa had bragged about them to family members, framing it as her being entrepreneurial with underutilized assets. She told me about Kevin's gambling problem, something I hadn't known, how he'd been betting on sports heavily and losing. She told me about cracks in their marriage that had been visible for months to anyone paying attention. But she didn't know about the affair or the embezzlement. That was still my card to play. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and looked out at the Pacific Ocean, the waves rolling in with their eternal patience. I thought about my daughter, about the kind of woman I wanted her to become, about the lessons we teach through our actions versus our words. I thought about my mother, who'd built a real estate empire in a male-dominated industry, who'd never apologized for her success, but also never lorded it over others. I thought about my father, who'd taught me that generosity was a gift, not an obligation, and that people who mistook kindness for weakness were revealing their own character, not yours. And I thought about Vanessa, my sister, the person who was supposed to have my back, who was supposed to teach her daughter to be strong and independent, not entitled and grasping. I thought about how she'd had every advantage in life, how our parents had loved us both, provided for us both, and yet she'd convinced herself she was the victim of some great injustice. The thing was, I didn't hate her. Even now, with everything she'd done, with everything she'd said, I didn't hate her. I pitied her, because the person she was hurting most with her bitterness and resentment was herself. She couldn't enjoy her own accomplishments because she was too busy comparing them to mine. She couldn't celebrate her daughter's successes because she was too busy measuring them against Isabella's. She'd poisoned her own life with envy, and now she was trying to poison mine. But I wasn't going to let that happen. My phone rang. It was Andrew Sutherland, my business partner. "Maria, we need to talk. Something's come up with the quarterly audit, and I think there might be some discrepancies in our accounts." And just like that, the timeline accelerated. Because the thing about lies and theft is that they always come to light eventually. The embezzlement Claire had been orchestrating with Kevin's help was about to surface whether I revealed it or not, which meant I needed to make my move now, before the situation spiraled out of my control. "Andrew," I said carefully, "I think you should come to my house this afternoon. There's something you need to see, and it's going to be difficult to hear. But I promise you, I have all the documentation you'll need." "What kind of documentation?" "The kind that explains why your audit is showing discrepancies. The kind that answers questions you're probably starting to have about your wife's spending habits and your associate's sudden interest in offshore banking." His sharp intake of breath told me he'd already suspected something. Good. That would make this slightly easier. "I'll be there at 3, he said. After we hung up, I made one more call, this one to my lawyer. "Richard, I need you to prepare a comprehensive legal package, everything we have on the Sutherland embezzlement case, organized for law enforcement. And I need you to draft a letter to Vanessa Winters, my sister, confidential, attorney-client privileged. The letter needs to inform her that her husband is under investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement, and that she has 48 hours to decide whether she wants to cooperate with authorities or go down with him." "Richard," I said slowly, "are you sure about this approach? Once you send that letter, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure. My sister needs to understand that actions have consequences, real consequences, not just losing access to a vacation house. And if she chooses to stand by her husband, then they both face the full weight of the law. But Richard, I don't think she will. Because ultimately, Vanessa is a survivor. She'll choose herself over Kevin every single time. That's who she is." I spent the rest of the morning organizing my evidence, preparing for Andrew's arrival. By the time he pulled up in his Tesla at 3 o'clock sharp, I had everything laid out in my home office. Photos of Kevin and Claire together, hotel receipts, bank statements showing the transferred funds, text messages discussing the scheme, everything. Andrew walked in looking like a man trying to hold himself together, and my heart broke for him. He was 63 years old, planning to retire in 2 years, looking forward to spending time with his grandchildren. Instead, he was about to discover that his wife of 35 years had betrayed him in the worst possible way. "Show me," he said without preamble. I did.
I walked him through everything the investigator had found, every piece of evidence, every damning detail. I watched his face cycle through denial, anger, grief, and finally a kind of grim acceptance. "How long have you known?" he asked when I finished. 6 months. I hired the investigator the night I saw them together at a restaurant. I wanted to be absolutely sure before I said anything. 6 months and you didn't tell me? I know, and I'm sorry for that. But Andrew, I needed to have ironclad proof. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. Because accusing your wife of having an affair is one thing. Accusing her of embezzling from your business and involving my sister's husband in a federal crime, that requires absolute certainty. He nodded, accepting this logic, even though I could see it hurt. What do I do now? You call your lawyer. You call the FBI. You protect yourself and your business. And then you divorce her and make sure she can't take another penny from you. And Kevin? That's up to you. But my lawyer is prepared to send evidence to the State Bar Association, which would likely result in disbarment proceedings. Combined with the federal charges, he's looking at serious prison time. What about Vanessa? Does she know? Not yet, but she's about to find out, and she's going to have to make a choice about whether she wants to be complicit in her husband's crimes or save herself. Andrew stood, gathering the documents I'd given him, his hands shaking slightly. "Thank you for telling me. I know this can't have been easy." "No," I agreed, "but it was necessary. You're my friend and my partner. You deserved to know the truth." After he left, I called Richard back. "Send the letter to Vanessa. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Make sure it's delivered by messenger, signature required. I want her to have it before Kevin realizes the walls are closing in." Consider it done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about how the next week would unfold, about the devastation my sister was about to experience, about whether I was doing the right thing. Part of me, the part that remembered us as children, playing in our parents' backyard, sharing secrets and dreams, wanted to warn her, to give her a heads up, to somehow cushion the blow. But then I thought about Isabella's face when Sienna took her tablet. I thought about Vanessa saying, "Your kid has too much anyway." I thought about years of small cruelties, of boundaries crossed, of generosity taken for granted and twisted into resentment. I thought about what kind of example I'd be setting for my daughter if I let this behavior continue without consequences. And I knew I was doing the right thing. Sometimes love means letting people face the results of their choices. Sometimes protecting your child means drawing lines in the sand and refusing to move them, even when family pressure tries to force you back. Sometimes being kind means being firm. The next morning, I got a text from my lawyer at 9:30. Letter delivered and signed for by Vanessa Winters at 9:17 a.m. Now all I had to do was wait. She called at 10:03 a.m. "Maria." Her voice was different, stripped of its usual confidence. "I got a letter from your lawyer. Tell me this is a joke. Tell me this isn't real." "It's real, Vanessa. Every word of it." "You're lying. You're making this up to get back at me for the lake house thing. You're trying to ruin my marriage because I hurt your feelings?" Read the letter again, specifically the part about how long the FBI typically recommends for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Then ask yourself if I would fabricate federal crimes to get revenge over hurt feelings. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then, how did you find out? Does it matter? Kevin says it's not what it looks like. He says Claire is just a friend, that any money transfers were legitimate business expenses. Vanessa, stop. You've already talked to him about this? Of course I did. He's my husband. And there it was, the fundamental difference between us.
I would have verified the facts first, checked the evidence, made sure I understood the full picture before confronting anyone. Vanessa had immediately run to Kevin, giving him time to craft his story, to manipulate her, to convince her that somehow $3 million in embezzled funds were legitimate business expenses. Then you've made your choice, I said. When the FBI comes calling, and they will, probably within the week, you can tell them all about these legitimate business expenses. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by your explanation. You vindictive witch, you're going to send my husband to prison over a stupid tablet? No, Vanessa, Kevin is going to send himself to prison because he committed federal crimes. I'm just ensuring that justice is served. There's a difference. You'll never forgive me for this. You're destroying my family. Your family destroyed itself. I'm just refusing to help you hide the wreckage anymore. She hung up, and I knew that I'd lost my sister, maybe forever. The woman I'd grown up with, who'd held my hand at our mother's funeral, who'd been my maid of honor at my wedding, who'd brought me soup when I had the flu. That person was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who'd chosen resentment over love, greed over integrity, denial over truth. Or maybe she'd always been this person, and I'd just been too generous, too forgiving, too desperate to believe that family meant something more than shared genetics. But here's what I realized, sitting in my beautiful home with my ocean views and my successful businesses and my wonderful daughter. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your success instead of resenting it, who teaches their children to be good humans instead of entitled consumers. And by that definition, Vanessa hadn't been family in years. That afternoon, Isabella came home from school and found me on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She sat down next to me, quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did something happen with Aunt Vanessa?" "Yes," I said, "something big, but it's not your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and those choices have consequences. Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so, but she's going to have to face some hard truths, and that's never easy." Isabella leaned against me, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, breathing in the coconut scent of her shampoo. This was what mattered, this right here. Protecting her, teaching her, showing her that you don't have to be cruel to be strong, but you also don't have to be a doormat to be kind. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for standing up for me when Sienna took my tablet. I know that wasn't easy." "It was the easiest thing in the world," I told her, and meant it, because when it comes down to it, protecting your child from toxic people, even when those toxic people are family, isn't a choice at all. It's an obligation. It's love in its purest, fiercest form. 3 days later, the FBI raided Kevin's office. I know because Andrew called to tell me, his voice still raw with pain, but also relief that the truth was finally coming out. They'd arrested Claire at her Pilates class, which felt somehow fitting, caught in the middle of pretending her life was perfect while her crimes unraveled around her. Kevin was arraigned that afternoon. Bail was set at $2 million, which Vanessa couldn't make because, as it turned out, most of their liquid assets had already been frozen as potential proceeds of crime. He spent the weekend in county jail, which I imagine was quite an adjustment for a man who'd been living in Manhattan Beach and driving a Porsche. And through it all, my phone stayed silent. Vanessa didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out. I heard through Aunt Carmen that she was trying to sell their house, that Sienna had been pulled from private school, that the country club membership had been quietly terminated. I heard that Vanessa had filed for divorce and was cooperating with federal investigators, throwing Kevin completely under the bus to save herself. This didn't surprise me. Like I'd told Richard, Vanessa was a survivor above all else. She'd choose herself every single time. But what did surprise me was the call I got from Sienna exactly 2 weeks after the tablet incident at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. "Aunt Maria?" Her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the entitled teenager who'd grabbed my daughter's tablet. "Sienna? What's wrong, honey?" I wanted to say I'm sorry. About the tablet. About everything. I didn't know Dad was doing bad things. I didn't know Mom was lying about stuff. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." My heart cracked open despite everything. Because Sienna was 14, just a kid, and none of this was really her fault. She'd been raised by parents who'd taught her all the wrong lessons, who'd modeled entitlement and dishonesty, who'd failed her in the most fundamental ways. "Sienna, listen to me. What your dad did, what your mom did, that's on them, not you. You're not responsible for their choices." "But I acted just like them. I took Isabella's tablet because Mom always says we deserve nice things too, that you have too much and should share. I never thought about how that made Isabella feel. I never thought about how mean that was." "The fact that you're thinking about it now means you're growing up. You're learning. That's what matters." "Can I talk to Isabella? I want to apologize to her too." I looked over at my daughter, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, and she nodded without me even asking. She'd heard enough of the conversation to understand. "Hold on, I'm putting her on." I handed the phone to Isabella and watched as she listened to whatever Sienna was saying. Then she said, "It's okay. I forgive you. And if you need anything, if things get really bad, you can call me, okay?" They talked for a few more minutes, these two girls trying to navigate the wreckage their parents had created, and I felt something shift inside me. Not regret. I didn't regret what I'd done, but a kind of clarity about what justice really meant. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about truth. It was about making sure the right lessons got learned, that the next generation didn't repeat the same mistakes, that boundaries got established and respected, and sometimes justice meant being the adult in the room, even when you wanted to burn everything down. When Isabella handed back the phone, Sienna was crying. "Aunt Maria, I know you probably hate us now, but if there's ever anything I can do to make this right, I will. I promise." "I don't hate you, Sienna. I never did. But I need you to understand something important. Wanting things is normal. Taking things that don't belong to you because you want them, that's where the problem starts. Your parents forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. Don't let yourself forget it." "I won't. I promise I won't." After we hung up, Isabella looked at me with those wise beyond her years eyes. "You're going to help them, aren't you? Even after everything?" "Not them," I clarified. "Her. Sienna didn't ask for any of this, and I'm not going to punish a kid for her parents' mistakes." "What about Aunt Vanessa?" "Your aunt made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. But that doesn't mean her daughter should suffer more than necessary." What I didn't tell Isabella was that I'd already set up a trust fund for Sienna, one that would pay for college and living expenses once she turned 18, contingent on her maintaining good grades and staying out of legal trouble. It was the kind of thing my mother would have done: firm boundaries, real consequences, but also grace for the innocent. I'd had my lawyer draft the paperwork the same day I'd sent the letter to Vanessa, because even in my anger, even in my pursuit of justice, I knew that 14-year-old girls shouldn't pay for their father's federal crimes. The following Monday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Maria Castellano, this is Special Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. I'm leading the investigation into Kevin Winters and Claire Sutherland. I'd like to thank you for the evidence you provided. It's been instrumental in building our case." I'm glad it helped.
There's something else I wanted to discuss with you if you have a moment. We've been interviewing your sister, Vanessa Winters, and she's been extremely cooperative. She's provided additional documentation we didn't have, helped track down hidden accounts, essentially doing everything she can to distance herself from her husband's activities. That sounds like Vanessa.
The thing is, Mrs. Castellano, in our investigation, we've also uncovered some interesting information about your family's business dealings, specifically some real estate transactions from about 8 years ago, when your father was still alive. I wonder if you'd be willing to come in and discuss them with us. My blood went cold. What kind of transactions? I'd rather discuss it in person. Would tomorrow afternoon work? Say 2 o'clock at our LA field office? Agent Chen, am I being investigated for something? Not at this time. We just have some questions. But I'd strongly recommend bringing your attorney. She hung up, and I immediately called Richard. The FBI wants to meet with me tomorrow. They're asking about real estate transactions from when my father was alive. What the hell is going on? Don't panic. This might be nothing. But I'll be there with you tomorrow and we'll figure out exactly what they're looking at. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I went through every business deal my father had ever done, trying to figure out what could possibly interest the FBI. My father had been meticulous about following the law, sometimes maddeningly so. He'd turned down lucrative deals because they'd had even a whiff of impropriety about them. What could they possibly have found? At midnight, it hit me. 8 years ago. There'd been one deal, one single transaction that had always bothered me, even though my father had assured me it was legitimate. A commercial property sale to a development group that had ties to a local politician. The sale had gone through quickly, the price had been excellent, and my father had said it was just good business. But I'd always wondered if there'd been something more to it. Some kind of arrangement I hadn't been privy to. I pulled the files from storage the next morning, spent hours going through documents, and by the time Richard picked me up for the FBI meeting, I had a sick feeling in my stomach. Agent Chen met us in a sterile conference room with fluorescent lighting that made everything look washed out and harsh. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Another agent sat next to her, a man introduced as Agent Brooks, who stayed silent throughout the meeting. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Castellano. I'll get right to it. In 2018, your father's company sold a commercial property on Wilshire Boulevard to Redstone Development Group for $18 million. Does that ring a bell? Yes, I remember that transaction. What you might not know is that Redstone Development was a shell company controlled by a man named Thomas Marchetti. Mr. Marchetti is currently under federal indictment for corruption, bribery, and laundering. We've been investigating his activities for the past 3 years. My mouth went dry. My father had no idea. We know. Your father appears to have been completely unaware who really controlled Redstone. But here's where it gets complicated. Your sister, Vanessa Winters, was working for your father's company at the time, and according to documentation we've recovered, she was the one who brought the Redstone deal to your father. She was the one who communicated with their representatives. She was the one who pushed for the quick closing. I stared at her. You think Vanessa was involved with Marchetti's operation? We think it's possible. We've found records of payments from Marchetti to an offshore account that we've traced back to a company registered in your sister's name. Small payments, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, always just under reporting thresholds. Over the course of 3 years, she received approximately $800,000. The room tilted. That's impossible. Vanessa wouldn't what? Engage in financial crimes? Mrs. Castellano, your sister's husband is facing federal charges for embezzlement conspiracy. Your sister herself has demonstrated a pattern of using assets that don't belong to her for personal gain, like the Airbnb rentals of your property. Is it really so hard to believe she might have been accepting bribes to facilitate corrupt real estate deals? Richard put his hand on my arm. Agent Chen, what exactly are you asking my client? I'm asking if she had any knowledge of these payments, any awareness that her sister might have been involved with Marchetti, any information at all that might help our investigation. No, I said firmly. I knew nothing about this. I wasn't involved in that deal beyond signing the final paperwork. Vanessa handled the details. Did your father know? Absolutely not. If he'd had even the slightest suspicion that something wasn't legitimate, he would have walked away from the deal immediately. My father was many things, but corrupt wasn't one of them. Agent Chen studied me for a long moment. I believe you. Your father's reputation supports that. But here's the situation. We need your sister's cooperation on this. The Marchetti case is much bigger than the embezzlement with her husband. We're talking about years of corruption, multiple public officials compromised, tens of millions of dollars misappropriated. If Vanessa can give us information about how Marchetti operated, who else was involved, how the money moved, she could help us take down an entire network. And if she cooperates, we might be able to offer her immunity on the bribery charges. She'd still face consequences, but nothing compared to what she's looking at if we charge her as a co-conspirator in Marchetti's operation. I sat back, trying to process this. My sister hadn't just been resenting my success and taking advantage of my generosity, she'd been actively corrupt, taking bribes, facilitating illegal deals, all while working for our father's company, all while pretending to be the victim of my good fortune. There's something else, Agent Chen continued. The reason we're telling you all of this is because Vanessa has refused to cooperate. She's denying everything, claiming the offshore accounts aren't hers, that the payments were for consulting work, that she has no information about Marchetti. Her lawyer is stonewalling us. Why are you telling me this? Because we think you might be able to convince her. You were the one who exposed her husband's crimes. You clearly have influence in this family. And frankly, Mrs. Castellano, we need your sister to flip on Marchetti. Without her testimony, he might walk on the most serious charges. Richard spoke up. Agent Chen, you're asking my client to convince her sister to testify against a dangerous criminal. That puts her at risk. Marchetti is already in custody. He's not a physical threat, but he is a threat to justice if we can't build a solid case against him. I thought about my father, about how he'd built his business on integrity and hard work. I thought about how betrayed he would have felt knowing that his own daughter had been using his company to facilitate corruption. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with him before he died, when he'd made me promise to always do the right thing, even when it was hard. I'll talk to her, I said, but I can't promise she'll listen to me. We're not exactly on good terms right now. Understood, but Mrs. Castellano, if she doesn't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to charge her. She's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I'm giving you the chance to help her avoid that. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been so focused on exposing Kevin's crimes, on teaching Vanessa that actions have consequences, that I'd somehow become the person who might save her from her own even worse crimes. Richard and I left the FBI office in silence. In the car, he finally said, "You don't have to do this. The FBI will pursue their case either way." I know, but my father would have wanted me to try, not for Vanessa's sake, but for his. He spent 40 years building a legitimate business, and she used it to facilitate corruption. The least I can do is try to minimize the damage. And if she refuses, if she turns this around and blames you somehow, then I'll know I tried, and I can live with that. I called Aunt Carmen that night and explained the situation, leaving out the specific details, but conveying that Vanessa was in serious legal trouble and needed to cooperate with federal investigators. Carmen was quiet for a long time, then said, "I always wondered where she got the money for that beach condo she bought a few years ago.
She said it was from investments, but her salary didn't match her spending. I should have asked more questions. None of us knew, Aunt Carmen. She was hiding it from everyone. Will you really try to help her, after everything she's done to you? I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for Dad, and for Sienna. That girl doesn't need her mother going to prison on top of everything else. You're a better person than I am, Maria. I don't know if I could be that generous. It's not generosity. It's just knowing the difference between justice and cruelty. Vanessa needs to face consequences, but I'm not going to let her destroy herself out of pride when there's another option. The next day, I drove to Vanessa's house in Manhattan Beach. The for sale sign was already in the yard, and the property looked different somehow, diminished, as if the house itself knew its owner's fortunes had changed. I rang the doorbell and waited, half expecting no one to answer. But Vanessa opened the door, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, clothing I'd never seen her wear before. She looked exhausted, defeated, nothing like the polished woman who'd walked into my house 3 weeks ago to claim my daughter's tablet. "What do you want?" she asked, but there was no venom in it, just weariness. "To talk. Can I come in?" She stepped aside, and I walked into a house that was already being packed up, boxes everywhere, furniture wrapped in plastic. "We have to be out by the end of the month. The bank's foreclosing. Turns out, when your husband's assets get frozen and you're under federal investigation, you can't exactly make your mortgage payments." We sat in her kitchen, on bar stools that probably cost $3,000 each, in a kitchen that had been featured in Coastal Living magazine 2 years ago. I talked to the FBI. They told me about Marchetti.
Vanessa's face went white. They had no right. They had every right. Vanessa, you took bribes. You facilitated corrupt deals using Dad's company. Do you have any idea how much that would have hurt him if he'd known? Dad's dead. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. It matters that you used his business, his reputation, his hard work to line your own pockets. I needed the money, she exploded suddenly, all the weariness vanishing in a flash of anger. Do you have any idea what it's like to always be second, to watch your sister get everything while you get the scraps? Dad left you the business, Mom left you this house, and I got, what, a couple million in a condo? That wasn't fair, Maria. It was never fair. So you decided to take bribes? To commit federal crimes? That was your solution? I decided to level the playing field, to take what I deserved, and it worked fine until you decided to destroy my life over a stupid tablet. I didn't destroy your life. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped enabling you. She laughed, this bitter sound. Enabling me? You never helped me with anything. You just sat in your mansion counting your money while I struggled. You didn't struggle, Vanessa. You made $300,000 a year at your job. You lived in a multi-million-dollar house. You sent your daughter to private school. The only reason you felt like you were struggling was because you kept comparing yourself to me instead of being grateful for what you had. Easy for you to say. You got everything handed to you. I worked in Dad's business from the time I was 22 years old. I learned every aspect of it, put in 80-hour weeks, sacrificed my social life, earned his trust. You wanted to do your own thing, have your own career, which was fine, but you don't get to resent me for the consequences of your own choices. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I hate you. I hate that you're right. I hate that I ruined everything. I hate that my daughter looks at me like I'm a monster. I hate all of it. Then fix it. Cooperate with the FBI. Tell them everything you know about Marchetti.
Take responsibility for what you did. And go to prison? They're offering immunity if you cooperate. You wouldn't face charges for the bribery. You'd have to testify, and you'd probably lose your marketing job once it all comes out, but you wouldn't go to prison. Why do you even care? Wouldn't you prefer to see me locked up? I thought about this question, really thought about it. No. I want you to face consequences, yes. I want you to understand that the way you've been living, the resentment and entitlement and dishonesty, that can't continue. But I don't want Sienna to have both parents in prison. I don't want our family completely destroyed. And I don't want Dad's business to be forever associated with corruption because you made bad choices. If I testify against Marchetti, he'll ruin me. He'll make sure everyone knows I took his money. Everyone's going to find out anyway. At least this way, you can control the narrative a little bit. You can show that you made mistakes, but you're trying to make them right. She put her head in her hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. You're a lot of things, Vanessa, and not all of them are good. But you're strong. You're a survivor. You've spent your whole life fighting for what you think you deserve. Now fight for what's actually right.
We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "What happened to us, Maria? We used to be close. When did it all go wrong?" "I think it went wrong when you decided that my success diminished yours. When you started seeing life as a competition instead of a journey we were taking together." "I'm sorry for all of it. For teaching Sienna that wanting things meant deserving them. For taking advantage of you. For resenting your happiness instead of building my own. I'm sorry." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever heard from her, and it cracked something open in my chest. "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I didn't see how much you were struggling emotionally. I'm sorry I didn't try harder to understand where your anger was coming from. You have nothing to apologize for. This is all on me. Maybe, but I could have been a better sister. I could have checked in more, noticed more, cared more about your feelings even when they weren't rational." Vanessa looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "If I do this, if I testify and cooperate and try to make this right, can we ever be sisters again? Real sisters? Not just people who share DNA?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'd like to try. For Dad, for Mom, for our daughters. I'd like to believe we can come back from this." "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll call my lawyer and tell him I want to cooperate with the FBI." I left her house an hour later, emotionally exhausted but also lighter somehow. I'd done what I could. The rest was up to Vanessa and to Justice and to whatever healing might be possible for our broken family. The next 3 months were a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and family drama. Kevin was convicted on 12 counts of conspiracy and fraud and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Claire Sutherland got 10 years. Vanessa testified against Thomas Marchetti in a trial that made national news, exposing years of corruption in LA's commercial real estate industry. She was granted immunity on the bribery charges, but was required to forfeit the $800,000 she'd received, plus penalties. She lost her job, her reputation, and most of her friends. But she kept her freedom, and more importantly, she kept her daughter. I watched from the sidelines as Vanessa slowly rebuilt her life. She sold the Manhattan Beach house, downsized to a modest apartment in Redondo Beach, and got a job managing social media for a small nonprofit. It was humbling, going from a 6-figure salary and a luxury lifestyle to struggling to make ends meet, but she did it with more grace than I'd expected. Sienna stayed with her, though she spent every other weekend at my house, and slowly the two girls rebuilt their relationship. 6 months after the Marchetti trial, Vanessa showed up at my door unannounced.
For a second, I flashed back to that day with the tablet, to the moment that had started everything. But her face was different now, open, vulnerable, without the sharp edges of resentment that used to define her features. "I wanted to give you something," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. "Vanessa, what is this?" "It's a start. On paying you back for all the years I used your lake house, for the times I borrowed things and never returned them, for all the ways I took advantage of your generosity. I know it's not enough, but it's what I can afford right now. I'll pay you the rest over time." "You don't have to do this."
Because you were right about everything. Actions have consequences. Boundaries matter. And family isn't about taking what you can get. It's about giving what you can afford to give. I took the check, not because I needed the money, but because I understood that Vanessa needed to give it. She needed to make amends in concrete ways, not just words. "Thank you," I said. "This means a lot." "There's something else." She pulled out another envelope, this one thicker. "I've been seeing a therapist, working through a lot of stuff. The resentment, the entitlement, why I became the person I became. And she suggested I write you a letter, explaining everything, not making excuses, but just being honest about my feelings. I'd like you to read it, but only if you want to." I took the letter. "I'll read it tonight." "Can I ask you something? Why did you set up that trust fund for Sienna, the one for college?" "How did you find out about that?" "My lawyer mentioned it. He said you'd had it established before any of the legal stuff went down, that it was completely protected from any judgments or penalties. You set it up before you even knew about Marchetti, before the FBI got involved. Why?" "Because Sienna's just a kid. She didn't deserve to have her future destroyed because her parents made mistakes. And because someone once told me that the measure of a person isn't how they treat people who can benefit them, but how they treat people who can't. Sienna couldn't do anything for me, but I could do something for her." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "You're a better person than I deserve as a sister." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to be the person Dad and Mom raised me to be. Someone who understands that justice and compassion aren't opposites, they're partners." We talked for another hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. It wasn't comfortable, and it didn't erase the past, but it was real, and real was more valuable than comfortable any day. That night, after Vanessa left, I sat on my terrace and read her letter. It was 20 pages long, handwritten and brutally honest. She wrote about growing up in my shadow, about how every accomplishment of hers seemed diminished by comparison to mine, about how our parents' obvious preference for me, not in love, she acknowledged, but in trust and responsibility, had planted seeds of resentment that grew over years into something toxic. She wrote about the first time she'd taken money from Marchetti, how she'd justified it as balancing the scales, how that first compromise had made the next one easier, until she was so deep in corruption that turning back felt impossible. She wrote about teaching Sienna entitlement because it was easier than examining her own bitterness, about how the tablet incident had been a breaking point she didn't even recognize until I'd sold the lake house. And she wrote about gratitude, for the trust fund, for not pressing charges over the Airbnb situation, for giving her a chance to cooperate with the FBI instead of just letting her go down with Kevin. "You could have destroyed me completely," she wrote. "You had every right to. Instead, you gave me a chance to save myself. That's grace I didn't deserve, but will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of." I folded the letter carefully and sat watching the ocean, thinking about everything that had happened. The tablet incident felt like a lifetime ago now, not just 3 months. So much had changed, so much had been revealed, so many illusions had shattered. But here's what I'd learned. Revenge, Real revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about holding up a mirror and making them see themselves clearly, then giving them the choice of what to do with that knowledge. I could have crushed Vanessa completely. I could have let her go to prison, let Sienna end up in foster care, let our family implode spectacularly. That would have been revenge in its simplest form. Instead, I'd chosen something harder: accountability with compassion, consequences with possibility, justice with mercy. Did Vanessa deserve mercy? Maybe not. But Sienna deserved a mother who could learn and grow. My daughter deserved an aunt who could model redemption instead of just destruction. And I deserved to know that I'd done the right thing, even when it was complicated and messy, and didn't feel as satisfying as pure vengeance would have felt. Isabella found me on the terrace an hour later. "Mom, you okay?" "Yeah, baby, I'm good." Sienna called. She wanted to know if she could come over this weekend. She said her mom's doing better and they've been talking a lot about everything that happened. "What did you tell her?" I said yes. That's okay, right? I mean, I know Aunt Vanessa was really terrible to you, but Sienna's trying really hard to be different, and I think she needs a family that isn't falling apart. I pulled my daughter close. That's more than okay. That's exactly right. And you know what? I'm proud of you for forgiving Sienna, for being mature enough to separate her from her parents' mistakes. That takes real strength. You taught me that. You showed me that you can set boundaries and still be kind, that you can protect yourself without becoming mean. That's what you did with Aunt Vanessa, right? You made sure there were consequences, but you didn't try to destroy her. Exactly. Because destroying people doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you someone who destroys people. And that's not who I want to be, and it's not who I want you to be. Did Aunt Vanessa learn her lesson? I think so. I hope so. Time will tell. We sat together as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in deeper shades of purple and gold. In the distance, I could hear the waves rolling in, steady and patient, the way they'd been rolling in for millions of years before us and would continue for millions of years after. 3 months later, I got a call from Agent Chen. "Mrs. Castellano, I wanted to let you know that the Marchetti trial concluded today. Guilty on all counts. 32 years in federal prison. Your sister's testimony was crucial to the conviction." I'm glad justice was served. There's something else. During the investigation, we uncovered evidence that Marchetti had been planning to target your business next. He had a whole operation planned to compromise one of your properties, force a corrupt deal, the same way he did with your father's company. If you hadn't exposed your brother-in-law's crimes, if your sister hadn't testified, Marchetti would have moved on you within the next 6 months. I felt cold suddenly. You're saying that by pursuing this, I actually protected my own business? That's exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes doing the right thing for the right reasons has unexpected benefits. Thought you should know. After she hung up, I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. I hadn't pursued justice to protect myself. I'd done it to teach my daughter about boundaries, to stop enabling toxic behavior, to honor my father's legacy. But in doing so, I'd inadvertently saved my business from the same corruption that had tainted his. The universe has a funny way of rewarding integrity, I thought. A year to the day after the tablet incident, I threw a party at my Palos Verdes house. Not a fancy charity gala or business event, but a simple family barbecue. Aunt Carmen was there with Uncle Roberto, my cousins and their kids, friends who'd stood by me through the chaos, and yes, Vanessa and Sienna were there too. It was awkward at first. Some family members didn't know how to act around Vanessa after everything that had come out, but gradually, as the afternoon wore on, people relaxed. Conversations happened. Healing, slow and tentative, began. Isabella and Sienna spent the day in the pool, laughing and splashing, looking like the cousins they were supposed to be. At one point, Vanessa came and stood next to me, watching them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For this, for everything. Your family," I said. "Complicated, messy, imperfect family, but still family. That has to mean something. It means everything." She paused. "I got a job offer. Real job, not just the nonprofit gig. It's with a corporate ethics consulting firm. They want someone who's been through the fire, who understands what corruption looks like from the inside, who can help companies build better compliance cultures." "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. It feels right, using my mistakes to help other people avoid the same ones, turning my worst moments into something useful." "Dad would like that." "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I think he would." As the sun set that evening and guests started to leave, I stood on my terrace one more time, looking out at the ocean. Isabella came and leaned against me, tired and happy from a day of swimming and playing with her cousin. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you glad you took my tablet back that day, when Sienna grabbed it?" I thought about this question, about everything that had followed from that single moment of deciding to draw a boundary. "Yes," I said finally, "because it wasn't really about the tablet. It was about teaching you that you matter, that your feelings are valid, that no one gets to dismiss you or take from you just because they want to. Those lessons are more valuable than any piece I could have bought by letting it slide." "You're saying that by pursuing this, I actually protected my own business?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes doing the right thing for the right reasons has unexpected benefits. Thought you should know." After she hung up, I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. I hadn't pursued justice to protect myself. I'd done it to teach my daughter about boundaries, to stop enabling toxic behavior, to honor my father's legacy. But in doing so, I'd inadvertently saved my business from the same corruption that had tainted his. The universe has a funny way of rewarding integrity, I thought. A year to the day after the tablet incident, I threw a party at my Palos Verdes house. Not a fancy charity gala or business event, but a simple family barbecue. Aunt Carmen was there with Uncle Roberto, my cousins and their kids, friends who'd stood by me through the chaos, and yes, Vanessa and Sienna were there too. It was awkward at first. Some family members didn't know how to act around Vanessa after everything that had come out, but gradually, as the afternoon wore on, people relaxed. Conversations happened. Healing, slow and tentative, began. Isabella and Sienna spent the day in the pool, laughing and splashing, looking like the cousins they were supposed to be. At one point, Vanessa came and stood next to me, watching them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For this, for everything. Your family," I said. "Complicated, messy, imperfect family, but still family. That has to mean something. It means everything." She paused. "I got a job offer. Real job, not just the nonprofit gig. It's with a corporate ethics consulting firm. They want someone who's been through the fire, who understands what corruption looks like from the inside, who can help companies build better compliance cultures." "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. It feels right, using my mistakes to help other people avoid the same ones, turning my worst moments into something useful." "Dad would like that." "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I think he would." As the sun set that evening and guests started to leave, I stood on my terrace one more time, looking out at the ocean. Isabella came and leaned against me, tired and happy from a day of swimming and playing with her cousin. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you glad you took my tablet back that day, when Sienna grabbed it?" I thought about this question, about everything that had followed from that single moment of deciding to draw a boundary. Yes, I said finally, because it wasn't really about the tablet. It was about teaching you that you matter, that your feelings are valid, that no one gets to dismiss you or take from you just because they want to. Those lessons are more valuable than any piece I could have bought by letting it slide.
And we still have family. It's different now, but it's real, right? Right. It's real because it's honest. We're not pretending anymore. We're not hiding resentments or enabling bad behavior. We're actually dealing with our problems like adults. That seems hard. It is hard, but easy isn't always better. Sometimes the hard thing is the right thing. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "When I grow up, I want to be like you. Strong but not mean, fair but not a pushover. Someone who stands up for herself but still believes in second chances." My throat tightened with emotion. "Baby, you're already that person. You forgave Sienna. You gave her another chance. But you also remembered the lesson. That people have to earn trust. That boundaries matter. That kindness doesn't mean being a doormat. I learned that from you. And I learned it from my parents, and you'll teach it to your kids someday, and that's how good things get passed down through families. Not money or houses or businesses, but values, integrity, the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard." That night, after Isabella went to bed, I pulled out a journal I'd been keeping throughout this entire experience. I wrote one final entry. "A year ago today, my niece took my daughter's tablet, and my sister said my kid had too much. I could have let it go. I could have kept the peace, swallowed my anger, maintained the status quo. Instead, I chose to draw a line. And that choice led to discoveries I never expected, battles I never wanted, and outcomes I couldn't have imagined. I exposed corruption. I protected my business. I taught my daughter about boundaries. I gave my sister a chance of redemption. I learned that justice doesn't have to be cruel, and that mercy doesn't have to be weak. The tablet was never the point. It was a symbol of years of taking without asking, of entitlement disguised as family obligation, of resentment masquerading as love. In taking it back, in whispering to my daughter to pack her things, I was really saying, we deserve better than this. You deserve respect. I deserve respect. Our family deserves honesty instead of pretense. What I learned is that revenge, when done right, isn't about destroying someone. It's about forcing truth into the light and letting people decide who they want to be in the face of it. Some people rise to the challenge, some don't, but you can't control that part. You can only control whether you stand firm in your values or compromise them for temporary peace. I chose to stand firm. And yes, there were casualties. My relationship with my sister will never be what it was. But maybe what it was wasn't actually good. Maybe what we're building now is honest, boundaried, earned. Before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading every single one. Your support means more than you know. I'll see you in the next story, and until then, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.